Thank you, Amy, and thank you all for coming. Again, my name is Connie, and and this is Caroline. We are thrilled to be here today. We have a deep respect for the military, and we're just very happy to be here today to talk about the job search and impart our knowledge of what it takes to succeed, both in the career fair, and we're going to touch upon many other things as well. We're going to get right into it because we have so much information we want to share. Here's our agenda. We're going to talk about the state of the job market, give you our take. We are going to go through the 6 steps to job search success. Caroline and I have written a book on the 6 steps that it takes to be successful in a job search, and what to do before, during, and after a career fair, because that is our focus here today, to make sure it's as successful as it possibly can be. And then we're going to open it up to questions. This is very informal. If you have a question while we're going on, you don't have to wait till the end, or you can write it down and wait till the end, whatever you feel comfortable with. But the more interactive it is, we find the better the learning. So please feel free to take notes, write down any questions you have. Let's see, 1, 2, 3. A little bit of a delay. There you go. So who are we? We are job search experts. We have a combined 40 years of experience in the job search. We got together at the end of 2007, beginning 2008, so we're getting to almost 6 years now. And we've worked for Fortune 500 companies. We really have 3 unique perspectives. We work with one-on-one with individuals on the job search, so highly customized, very individual. We work with universities across the country, and in fact, the book that we've written is basically a textbook on the job search, and over 20 or 24 universities are using it. And we also work with corporations. So we really feel like we have our finger on the pulse of what's happening, both with individuals, graduating MBAs, students, undergrads as well, and also at corporations, both at the entry level, the mid-level, and the very senior level of the organization. So we will give you that perspective. We also, we used to run firm-wide recruiting efforts. So in our history together, we have hired thousands and thousands of people. So our unique value to you is that we give you the employer's view. What does an employer think when they look at a resume, when they speak to you, when they shake your hand? We want you to think like an employer when you execute your job search. And we also teach at Columbia. We're adjunct professors in career development. So we work with individuals. It's a mandatory class at Columbia in the job search. And we're out and about in the press quite a bit. So my background specifically is 25 years I was on Wall Street. So I worked for Fortune 500 companies, Merrill Lynch, Citigroup, and Pfizer, mostly in staffing with some marketing and some sales experience as well, mixed in there. But big company focus for me, very consistent career on my side. I've hired, again, thousands and thousands of people. Caroline's a little different, and the two of us combined really do represent quite different versions of the process. So Caroline, why don't you introduce yourself?
So my name is Caroline Ceniza-Levine, and when Connie talks about the different perspectives of the job search, one thing that you didn't mention was that we've also been job seekers. I mean, before we started our own company, we worked in traditional jobs. And so we have also looked for a job, and I can tell you that I especially have looked for jobs because I'm what I call an extreme career changer. So I started my career as a classical pianist. I trained as a pianist, and then I moved into business, became a management consultant. Then I became a recruiter, and that's where Connie and I connected. I did recruiting for a while. Then I dropped out of corporate altogether to do acting because I missed being in the arts. Then I went back into corporate, this time big corporate. So initially when I was doing consulting and executive search, these were small companies. Then I worked for Time Inc., which is part of Time Warner. We don't know how long that's going to last, but now part of Time Warner, so big company before we then started our own company. And so in addition to everything that Connie said about having hired thousands of people and now working with job seekers, we ourselves have been job seekers. And so I get that, this is a process. So let's jump into the market. But before we do that, we're going to leave time for questions at the end, but I always like to take questions now. And the reason why I do, I'm not going to say that we're going to answer them all now as you ask them, but I like to write them down here and to give us a sense for, what's on your mind. This is a full house. People obviously came out, obviously for the career fair 2 weeks from now, but kind of what are your job search questions? We can be totally candid here. This is cone of silence space, right? So you're in front of two recruiters who have hired thousands of people and who can, talk about the process. So what is it that you would like to know? And we can try to weave that into the conversation.
So what are your thoughts before the career fair? That we want to, at the very least, cover
them
what you're most concerned about with the career fair. But any thoughts?
Mm-hmm. Any question? Yeah.
One concern would be the contracting, government-related jobs, as
Mm-hmm.
your non-government jobs. Obviously, with the concerns about budget.
With the sequester, just wondering, like, is there going to be stuff available?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Any other thoughts?
Yeah.
What if you've been out of the job market for a significant amount of time
Mm-hmm.
and re-enter it? How do
Right.
you manage it?
Yeah. So there's a term, on-ramp. Have you heard on-ramping? So this is when you've been off and then you're trying to get back on. So absolutely, yeah.
That applies to a lot of us in this room who've been working for the Army for 20 plus years.
Career change.
and
Yeah.
never done it.
Yeah. No, that's a big deal.
You had a question?
It actually was very similar to Todd's, the importance of domain-specific knowledge versus the ability to learn.
Mm-hmm.
Because
So the
we've been
skills you
doing something
already
different
have, and
versus the ability to acquire the new needed skills.
Yeah.
that the organization.
so acclimating to a new environment, learning new skills.
Yeah, I put that
Okay.
like related to career change too. Yeah.
Yeah.
Any-
Marketing yourself when you are an extreme career changer.
Mm-hmm.
Mhm.
And marketing yourself when you're not.
Right,
So,
just marketing yourself.
yeah. Any other
Anything
thoughts
else?
before we get started? Yep.
Learning about the culture of a company from an outsider's perspective.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Finding a job outside of events and job listings.
Okay.
Right. So how do you get jobs? There are some jobs that just aren't listed and get
Right.
filled. So how does that happen?
I've heard a good portion of the jobs are not listed.
Yes.
Yes, that hidden
We're going to
job
talk
market.
about that.
Yeah.
Yep. We call that the hidden job market. Yes.
How do you market yourself when you overqualify in a job?
Mm-hmm.
These are all good questions.
Yes. We're going to make sure we cover everything. Anything else before we get started? And if something comes to mind,
Okay.
just let us know.
Great. So yeah, so let's talk about this market, right? So I think the sequester is very top of mind. I was just talking to, right, we were talking about that before you came in. Reduced headcount, lower recruiting budgets, just lower budgets all around. So what's interesting about the job search today is that companies are very gun shy about hiring as much as I think the media tries to portray that the job market is better. And it's interesting because I think we're seeing job seekers are more confident about the market. But on the employer side, what we're seeing from employers is that they're still pretty gun shy about just opening the floodgates and hiring, that they're really tight about who we bring in, the number of people that we bring in. Are we going to commit to a full-time role versus perhaps a contract or a temp or something like that, because the implications are different. And then even when they have to bring in people, they've cut so much already. A lot of their HR staffs, their recruiting staffs are cut, and so they're trying to do this hiring with less resources. And so that question about the hidden job market and how do you find out about these jobs, it's just less likely that they're going to be posting these things broadly and having to deal with this deluge of resumes. Right? So it's interesting because there's fewer jobs, and then from a job seeker's perspective, there are more job seekers, responding to basically everything. And so an employer knows, hey, if I post this now, I'm going to get a lot of interest, a lot of resumes. These aren't necessarily going to fit the job, and so I have to think about how do I hire. So this hidden job market issue is a big issue. On the job seeker side,
Well, actually, before you go there, what I want to say is I was listening to the radio just this morning, and Honeywell said, for every 2 employees that leave, we're just going to hire 1 person. So all of those pressures are very real, so you hear about it all the time.
yeah, and then on the job seeker side, I mean, there are, new industries. I mean, just take something like digital media, right? I mean, just it's a totally new industry. If you look at it over the last 5 years, I mean, there were pockets of it before, but it's just completely sprung up now, and there's a lot of hiring in that area. What's going to happen to healthcare, education? So there are a number of just different changes afoot. So while, you know, one could argue, well, it's a tight job market, but there are definitely pockets that are growing. And so the question is, how do you navigate that, right? And I talked about from the employer's perspective, that deluge of resumes. From a job seeker's perspective, that means that you have to do something different to stand out, right? So if you are only responding to postings or only going to events, you're going to be competing with everybody that's trying to do that. And so thinking about, you know, how to do that.
Our process that we've put together, and that seems to work for many, many different people, and we have worked individually with all branches of the military, so that's why we're so happy to come here today and work with a group, is to work on these 6 steps. So if there was ever a pre-step, it would be that you're mentally ready, psychologically ready to enter this job market and to do the very best you can do and to position yourself for success. It's almost like a psychological, you know, getting ready to do battle here, because no pun intended, that's really what a lot of people liken it to. Once you say to yourself, okay, I'm ready, step number 1 is identifying your target. What is the industry, the function, and the geography of your search? Okay, and it has to be that specific, because you can cast a wide net. I always say fishing, casting a wide net is really good for fishing, but really bad for the job search. You really want to be very targeted and very specific, and identifying your target is the first thing you really need to do. Because you can almost say that the job search is in 2 parts, identifying your target, and once you know that, everything else you need to do to get there. That's how important step number 1 is. So that's how we discuss identify your target. Step number 2 is your marketing campaign. Someone asked, you know, how do you market yourself? And that includes specifically 4 things. Your resume, and I know we're going to meet with some individuals on a one-on-one basis after this and, you know, review some resumes. We do it almost every single week. Review your resume, cover letter, your pitch. What do you say when you meet someone? What do you say to ensure that you're memorable, to ensure that you are driving your search forward in a value-focused way? So identify your target, your marketing material, which is your resume, your cover letter, your pitch, and LinkedIn. LinkedIn is key. Anyone who doesn't have a LinkedIn profile in this room? Okay, so we're going to talk about that a little bit. Very important, because almost every single recruiter uses LinkedIn for the job search. It's a very easy and fluid way to fill positions. Step 3, what this gentleman was talking about, research. You have to make sure that you research every aspect of that job before meeting anybody. And you can do, there are a lot of ways to research. Again, we're here to talk about the career fair, but that's something that's critical. Step 4 is networking and interviewing. So step 3 with research, you want to research who's coming later this month for the career search, for the career fair. But step 4 is where it's going to happen. You're going to be networking, you're going to be meeting people, and the more you network, the more you'll interview. The more you interview, the more you network. So they go together. They're 2 gargantuans of the job search, but they're together because they're so intertwined. Step 5 is staying motivated, organized, and troubleshooting your job search. Something that is an issue. You know, you really do have to. Troubleshooting is key, but staying motivated is really, really important. And then step 6 is negotiating and closing. When you negotiate an offer, a lot of the information about the compensation should be found in step number 3. The research should be that complete, so that when you're ready to negotiate, you have that information. So we can do 2-hour workshops on every single step here. So that's how meaty these topics are. But we really thought, we're here to talk about the career fair. We wanted you to see that the career fair is really step 3, you're going to do some research. Step 4, you're going to do some networking and interviewing. What to do before a career fair. And we have 2 slides on this, and this is the first one. So of course you have to take care of what you need to take care of to make sure, I don't know if there's a registration process, whatever that is, make sure from Christina or from Amy, you know exactly what you need to do, where it's going to be, what time it's going to be. Make sure that you block that period of time before to do research, but also certainly for that day. Sometimes we just schedule so much that we have things pressing in our mind, oh, we have to do this, we have to do this. Taking time to make sure that it's set and that that's time that you're going to invest your very best in is really important. Target companies. As these companies register, and there's always a rolling registration for career fairs, companies will come here at the last minute. make sure that once you get that list, you say, okay, here are my top 10, and here are my bottom 10. And then strategically say, okay, when am I going to get there, and where am I going to go first? Because I know that some of the career fairs that we've worked in, some representatives leave a little early, so you don't want to wait till the afternoon or the later part of the career fair to get there. Be there early, be aggressive, be proactive. Target your companies and conduct the research accordingly. So your top tier, make sure you conduct research on not only that company, but also the representatives that are going to come. I don't know if you will know the representatives that are going to come. That may not be the case. But see what you can find out about the head of the company. Go to the investor relations portion of the website and read some of the recent speeches given by the senior management team. You can learn a tremendous amount there. You can learn about the vision of the company, where they're going, what they believe in, what their goals are. What a tremendous advantage to know that in advance. And create your portfolio and start making those notes and build upon them. You might even want to do a Google alert on those companies. If anyone doesn't know what a Google alert is, you go to Google, you type Google alert. They'll prompt you to say, what do you want to do a Google alert on? You put the name of the company, you put your email address, and the information is fed directly to your email address. It's so easy. You create folders for each one of those companies, you put the information in, and when you have time to conduct that research, it's all in one place. So Google alerts are tremendous helps to you. Also, questions to ask. You really do have to think about 7 to 8 good questions that you would like to ask the person that you meet. And think about what's important to you, but based on the research, do enough research so that you're not only asking questions, but that you're testing hypotheses. For example, you could say, I understand the culture is one of a meritocracy. Can you give me an example of your experience with that? So it's not just asking, what is the culture like? Now you're proving that you've done some of the research. That is very impressive. That is very impressive to a representative. I know when I hired people, when I interviewed people, the better questions they asked, the more I was just very engaged in the conversation and in the whole hiring process. Okay, so research is key for sure. Create your marketing materials, your resume. When you do your resume, it's very important that, first of all, without anything said, it has to be error-free and very consistent in its format. It has to be pleasing to the eye, easy to read. I know some people have sent me resumes, with green on it, color shading of green. And in all my years of staffing, very little has changed in the resume. It's just a black and white document, easy to read. It really basically should have your 4 sections. It should have your header, or your name and your contact information. It should have experience, it should have education, and it should have additional. Those are the 4 components of a resume. I know a lot of people have leadership, and then a lot of people have extracurriculars. They're just organize it. I think everything can basically fit in those 4 segments. Cover letter. A cover letter is not just a regurgitation of the resume. A cover letter it makes the case for why you should be hired. It's a narrative that tells me something that I can't see in a resume. Now, this is critical for career changers, okay, 20 years in the military and out. This is where the rubber meets the road. Even if no one reads a cover letter is critical, because at least you make the case for why you should be hired to yourself, and then you can articulate it. Because as a hiring professional, I have to tell you, rarely did I read cover letters. I think you read cover letters more than I did, but everybody's different, all right? Your pitch, what do you say in 30 seconds, 45 seconds? There are some career fairs where they're going to be very long lines, so you don't want to, take up 3 minutes someone's time when there's like 25 people behind you. So do you have a pitch that's elastic? It could be 30 seconds, it could be 45 seconds, it could be 2 minutes. And practice that pitch. We're going to do something with that in a little bit. And then your online presence, Facebook, LinkedIn. My guideline is if your grandmother can see it without getting embarrassed, it's probably okay. Caroline, I don't know if you want to mention anything.
Yeah,
about
just keep in mind most recruiters are going to be using LinkedIn rather than Facebook. But even if you think you've cleaned up your Facebook profile, they're constantly changing their privacy settings. So even when you feel like you've set it for alerts and to detag all your photos, they're always changing it. So I don't put any personal information, my thing on Facebook, just because I don't even put my correct birth date, because I just feel like it's not secure. And from a professional standpoint, it isn't set up to be professional. Again, this is mentioning a lot of things. I wouldn't worry so much about Facebook. Just recognize, though, that depending on the company, some smaller entrepreneurial companies, and they're going to use Facebook more than big state companies, or that's a gross generalization, but that just gives you an idea.
I did have, as a recruiter at Merrill Lynch, we did check Facebook pages, and some people weren't hired because of their Facebook page. I remember that I presented a candidate to someone for employment, and she thought there was a privacy level on her Facebook page, and there wasn't, and it was quite embarrassing. And so take a look at it. Take a look at it, make sure it's okay. LinkedIn is so much more, absolutely relevant. And then practice interview skills and responses. This is where I find that a lot of people get extremely nervous with interviews. And to what I say, if you've mastered anything in life, you've mastered it because you've practiced it again and again and again. I know when I first played tennis, I was 16 years old, I got my new racket. I went down to the paddleball court and I kept hitting the ball and hitting the ball and hitting the ball. And you get better. Same thing with interview skills, same thing. The more you practice them, the more comfortable you're going to be. There was a gentleman who hired me to do about 3 hours of interview training. I said, okay, let's go for it. So I had my questions, I was ready to ask him, and he came and he met me and he said, you know what I did on my way here? And I said, no. And he said, I Googled the top 25 interview questions that you could be asked. I answered them, I recorded myself, and I listened to it on my way here. And I said, that's the most preparation I've heard of. And this was a gentleman who had built a company to a very successful level. He sold it, and he was looking to go into perhaps private equity. So he hadn't interviewed in 20 years. That's the level of preparation. There's really no excuse for not preparing in that way because they're available.
Before we move to the next slide, I just wanted to touch on a couple of things. So, a lot of the stuff we're talking about before a career fair, just keep in mind, you're not going to interview, unless there are going to be interview slots at the career fair. No, you're not going to interview at the career fair, right? You're not going to give a cover letter necessarily at the career fair, right? So the reason why we talk about doing this kind of stuff before the career fair is because in structuring a cover letter, in having to write a cover letter to your dream company, it forces you to think through, how do I know this company? Why would I be the right person to be hired for this company? And just keep in mind, these companies are coming to specifically a military career fair, right? There's a reason for that. They could be going to university career fair. There could be going to some general regional career fair. They're going to this career fair. So for the companies that you're interested in, find out, what is it? Is it from senior management? Do they have some kind of hire military veterans campaign that's going on? Is it someone specific that's coming? Maybe they're a West Point alum. And I wouldn't be, we're going to talk about what to do during the career fair, but definitely, as you approach the table, one of the first questions can be, what brings you here? What brings you to West Point? What brings you to this career fair? To understand, if that person says, I'm an alum, or I was in the service, or I don't know anything about that, I'm head of recruiting, I don't know anything about the military. Right, oh yeah, our company has a goal, but I myself don't know anything, because that's going to change, obviously, how you talk about yourself. So Connie talked about that elastic pitch, being able to talk about yourself in 30 seconds or 45 seconds. It's also being able to talk about yourself if you're talking to a military person who's going to understand the shorthand and know exactly, when you give your rank and what you did, they're going to understand what you do, versus someone who's not in the military. And that's just not going to resonate as much with them, right? Same thing with military spouses, right? So people, who just aren't of that life, they're going to need a shorthand to bring them up to speed around, okay, so what does that mean exactly? Does that mean that you travel all the time or have to relocate? Do you know what I mean? Like, people who are not of that life are not going to understand that. So the preparation has to be slightly different. And then, online presence, I just wanted to give you guys a shortcut. Google yourself. Like, Google your name. and see just what comes up. Typically, your LinkedIn profile will be the first thing that comes up because LinkedIn has such strong search engine optimization, so Google will take their results first. So it's also handy to have a LinkedIn profile just for that reason, because you can then control what it is that people see. And again, at the career fair, people aren't going to be Googling your Facebook page or your LinkedIn page, but in getting this stuff ready, in populating your LinkedIn profile where you have to have a summary that's basically like your 30-second pitch, you have to go through what is it that you're going to say. So that's just something to think about.
And when you conduct your research, remember that you bring it with you. I mean, it's fine to bring your portfolio with you, take a look at it before you go to the table, and you'll have it fresh in your mind, because things do get overwhelming sometimes.
Yeah, you know, and another thing with research, you can go into LinkedIn and you can do a search that has the company name and then put in the keywords, put West Point, put military, see who comes up from that company that has that profile. And you'll see just, okay, so what are they doing within the company? And what are their backgrounds? And let me just get an idea of who's there, right? So that's just an easy way to do that. Okay, so let's talk about more stuff to do before a career fair. Get your interview suit ready. For some folks, you know, you just haven't gone to an interview in a while or haven't gone to an event like this. If you have to get something dry cleaned or tailored or taken in or something, that's going to take a few days. You don't want to find out the night before that your suit doesn't fit. And we've seen that, you know, so people coming in with, you know, just ill-fitting stuff. So just make sure everything is ready. You don't want to be scrambling the day of to get there. Map your route and create your strategy. You know, so Connie talked about the research behind that to say, okay, there are 40 companies and I'm going to force rank them, and I'm going to say this is my top 10, this is my bottom 10, and you know, what are you going to do with lines, right? If there are lines around all of your dream companies, and what do? Do you go to your secondary companies first, and you know, just start thinking about how much time do I have there? When you get there, you know, what am I going to do if I have to wait? Really, what is the order of the things that I'm going to do? If you can get some kind of map of the location, I've done career fairs in buildings where it's, you know, disparate rooms, it's across the hall. I mean, it's really hard to navigate and to know where things are. So if you can get any of that kind of information in advance and even just go to the venue, even an empty venue, and just be like, oh, okay, it's one giant room, it's going to be a rectangle, I'm okay, or is it going to be up and down, is it going to be whatever it is? You want to know that in advance. It's also good for your anxiety level, just to say, okay, I've been here before, like it's just familiar. It's very, very helpful. And then finally, pack your bag. So, you know, I would recommend actually not even a bag. If you have a folio just like this one, where you can have just a folder with a stack of resumes on one side and something to take notes, and you can hook your pen in, it's just a much easier way to navigate the fair, and also as soon as you get to the table, just to have that facility and you're not reaching into your bag, because I've seen that too. You know, there's a line behind you and you're reaching for your bag and you pull out a resume, it's all crumpled at that point, and you know, so if you can have just a folio, that would be great. Don't assume that there's going to be water there, breath mint. You know, bring the stuff that you really need to bring. And make sure, you know, pens in the plural. You know, make sure that you just have stuff so you're not scrambling and you're going to look so put together when you can share a pen with the invariable employer who runs out at that point.
You know, the whole idea here is to control what you can control. One of the wisest men I met, he was the president of Merrill Lynch Investment Managers, and he would greet all of our new hires every year. And he said, a secret to success, control what you can control, so that when something happens and you're kind of thrown off, you're ready to deal with that. So control is key. Preparation is key. So now we're going to move on to during the career fair. There you go. So I'm a huge advocate of arriving early. Make sure that you're there as soon as you can be, because there are a lot of employers that will leave a little bit early. And also, you get there before those long lines exist, because as a recruiter, when I went to these career fairs, my jaw would be exhausted by the end of the day. And I would be just ready to go. I would be tired. And so the fresher you are, the better it's going to be. Make sure that you get them when they're fresh. You could also make sure that you get to more people instead of being condensed with the timing. Check for any last minute additions, research if you can before that happens, but there could be some people that aren't even on the list that just because they came that day, who knows. Write name on the right lapel, because when you shake your hand, they're going to be looking there, and make that first strong impression. The handshake is key. Some people have a very strong handshake and will bring you to your knees. Let's not do that. But then you don't want a limp handshake either. You really want a confident handshake. So if we're going to shake hands like that, just be strong, but it's not, doesn't bring people down. And eye contact, very important. So the eye contact just establishes that trust. If your nerves get the best of you, I found that a slight smile makes you feel more confident and makes you seem more confident. So I do believe that if you act more confident, you're going to be more confident. It's very much a game in that respect, both with the interview and with the career fair. So you have to mentally prepare yourself and then act as confident and like you're enjoying yourself. Some people feel like it's like going for root canal when you have to go for that interview or for that meeting, but you almost have to act like you're enjoying it. And hopefully you will.
So we're going to do an exercise, but just before we move on from this, so I wanted to just mention a couple of points. There's a great model in social media marketing which talks about awareness, engagement, and conversion, right? And this is about online marketing. But I actually think this is very, very relevant to a career fair. If you think about the reasons why an employer comes to a career fair, it's any one of those three. So awareness means I want to be affiliated with going to this military career fair. I want people to know who I am. I want job seekers to be aware of us. And at the same time, you as a job seeker, you're going there and saying, I don't expect to get hired right away after this career fair. I'm going to make an introduction just to let people know, leave my resume there, just to give some information, right? So I think you need to be prepared to do that. And the second thing is engagement. So this is the back and forth. So this is during the career fair. This is in that moment where you are at the table and you're talking. Is it just going to be to leave your resume? For some employers, that's their modus operandi. We want to collect as many resumes as possible. I'm only one person behind the table. There's a line 20 people deep. I'm going to get back to you. I'm going to take your resume. And I have to say, as a recruiter, I've done both. Where I've been at a career fair where it's mostly let me talk about the company that I'm representing, and it's an awareness thing, and there's a lot of sharing and going back and forth, and then sometimes there's just zero engagement, right? So sometimes it's just, I just need to take your resume. Sometimes I'll do interviews right then and there. A lot of engagement, right? And then the final thing is conversion. So it is very, very rare. Do not expect it to be getting an offer right then and there. But sometimes there's a situation where you might get an interview. You might get a direct, this looks great, we want to get in touch with you kind of thing. And there's a clear next step emanating right from the career fair. So you want to be prepared for that kind of stuff to happen as well, which is why in the before, we talked about the interview skills and the cover letter and things where, well, I'm not going to be giving a cover letter, but again, the preparation to do that is what is going to help you. Handshake. Don't be, oh, there's a question. I just want to, before I forget, don't feel bad if the person behind the desk doesn't shake your hand. I really want to make this point because I know you're a handshaker when you go to career fairs. I was not, okay? And I've seen it both ways. Keep in mind that for the employer, even though there are 40 employers there, we're all representing our own company, so it's really just one of us there, right? There might be 40 of us types, but there's just one person or two people or whatever it is behind the desk, and I don't know how many job seekers you're expecting, but it's gonna be a lot more than one or two, right? And so for us, it's just throngs of people. Typically, I've lost my voice by the end of a career fair. Typically, even if I want to sit down, I'm standing, because I can't see, with the people. So just recognize that the experience of the employer is going to be so different than what you experience. So don't feel bad if you think that they're shooing you off, or if they don't shake your hand, or if they perhaps, well, you're going to have to look at our website, or you're going to have to, some are just going to be, they're going to have more time than others. It's going to depend on their line, and just be aware of that. Question?
Can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
Kind of my question, Caroline, is in the past we've heard back from job seekers who've attended our career expos, and one of the biggest complaints they've had is, Amy, all they did was tell me to go to the website. So from a recruiter's perspective, can you just explain why that may be the case and what they can expect as a job seeker?
Sure. So it comes back to research. Connie's point on research and going to that website and seeing, what is their, what's going on with this company? Why might they be here? What are they hiring for? The best thing to look at the website is just to get a sense for what jobs have they posted, right? So that when you get to that table, you can have an idea and say, I noticed that you have, a compliance manager position open, and I was looking at a lot of contracts. That's my background. Is that the type of background that you're looking for? Saves that person at the desk a lot of trouble. So sometimes, especially if you get questions where it can be answered by the website, it's a very basic question. What's open now? What do you guys do? I've been to career fairs where people come up to my table and then they'll say, well, what do you do? And I have my collateral. I was working for Time Inc., the magazine company that does People, Sports Illustrated, Fortune. I had all of our magazines there, and they're looking at the magazines and they're like, so what do you do? And I'm like, I do the magazines. So I think there's a lot of basic stuff. So I think it works both ways, right? We're talking to hundreds of people. We know that it's 4 hours. We want to see as many people as possible. So if it's a basic question, we may refer it to the website. Because I've also seen it where employers linger too long in the beginning. They spend 10 minutes with the first person and the second person and third person, and then 6 people in, they're like, wow, the career fair is going to be over in an hour, and I'm 50 people deep, and then all of a sudden, it's not fair to anybody, right? Because then nobody else gets time. So don't feel bad if it's a short thing.
Oh, no, well, I got that.
When I used to man a career fair, and a recruiter wants to be able to clearly identify and categorize who they're meeting and what jobs they're interested in, and certainly what jobs they're suited for. So when I used to man my booth at a career fair, I would have a pencil or a pen, and I would collect the resumes, and I would just write 1 or 2 words. And then I would sort them out so that when I got back to my company, I knew what to do with the resumes. That's what a recruiter is constantly sorting. Their head is saying, okay, I could put this one here, this one here, this one here, and I don't know about this group. So make it easy for them, certainly. Make it as clear as you could be. I remember when I helped some individuals in the Air Force and also in the Marines, they used a lot of acronyms on their resumes, and I got lost with that. I didn't understand it. Especially in the Air Force, I said, could you just explain it to me when I was helping somebody with their resume? I said, Peter, I don't get what you did here. How big was your team? What was your position on the team? So he really broke it down so that I could understand. So and again, getting back to that early point, you don't know who you're going to talk to because probably the people's names are not there, so you don't know if they're military or non-military. Just assume that they're not and make it incredibly clear. A confused mind will say no. A confused recruiter will go to the next resume. So it has to be really clear.
For people who are comfortable with the professional pitch, because I have one, because I've practiced it, there is no substitute for practicing in performance conditions, right? So I guarantee that your pitch, whatever it is that you decide to say at the Career Expo, is going to be a lot easier just for having done even a little bit of this. And to the extent that you can just continue to do this, that you can work on your pitch, and we are going to talk about more concrete outline, but just to get in your mind, right, I'm going to practice how I'm going to introduce myself. It makes a huge difference. On the personal side, people said, oh, it's because these are the facts, right, because I know this to be true. And this is similar to what Connie was talking about in terms of the confidence, right, the mental preparation. I know this to be true. And I think that for a lot of people, the disconnect with their professional pitch is because sometimes people feel like a fraud. They don't know this to be true, that I have this expertise, that I have this, these years of experience that are valuable, especially if you're on-ramping, career changing, moving from one sector to another. Sometimes maybe you don't believe it yourself as you're saying, I have this experience.
Or you don't do the work ahead of time to prepare and understand what your strengths are. Because we all have strengths, all of us, and we have to think of examples that prove we have those strengths. So sometimes less of a fraud, but more of the fact that we're not as self-aware as we should be. And you need to be self-aware in the job search. We're looking for people that are self-aware.
Right, so the point is to get that professional pitch to that level of the personal pitch where it feels like I'm giving the facts. I'm not sugarcoating it. I'm not overestimating myself. I'm talking about things that are true, getting it to that level. And then finally, that point as well about the third one's the easiest because at that point I had been talking for 40 seconds. I already was comfortable with that other person. I'm comfortable. We hear that all the time. When it comes to pitching, when it comes to the interview, when it comes to any other networking encounter. And that point is, well, how can you get to that level of comfort and that level of readiness right from the top? Right? Is there something that you can do? Again, practicing is going to help a great deal, or maybe right before you go into the Career Expo, just buddying up with someone and really getting your voices warm and going back and forth and having a little bit of a role play so that when you step into the moment, you're already in that moment, right? You're in that moment in the waiting room, and it's not right now that I'm starting to have this conversation, right? So take that away, yeah. So the other reason why we do this exercise is because it's multidimensional. There's a professional, there's a personal, and there's an attributes part of it. Two people can have absolutely the same professional background, go to similar schools, be doing the same thing professionally, especially you're going to a military career fair, so there may be a number of you that have shared experience, whether it's as a veteran or as a spouse or as a whatever, right? This happens all the time. Personally, you might even have grown up in the same part of town or have a very similar type of upbringing. But then, there are attributes that are uniquely yours, and certainly the combination of that three, it's just going to be super, super rare that you have your exact twin out there somewhere. So if you think about what is really going to be valuable and memorable, Connie talked about the memorable pitch. Typically, it's going to be some combination of all those things because professionally as recruiters, we've heard so many pitches before. I can't think of a structure of a pitch that we haven't heard before. But if you think about where you can blend it, again, I'm not suggesting you lead with, my name is Caroline, my favorite color is red. But thinking about, well, I have more than my professional pedigree, I'm more than who my family is and where I grew up. I am a unique three-dimensional person, and I need to interact with my prospective employers, my colleagues, all of that kind of stuff with that same framework in mind.
Remember that when you do combine those three aspects, the professional, the personal, the attributes, you are truly a unique person with values and with a value that you bring to the organization. You have to know what is that value. It has to be crystal clear to you. That's why so much of the work has to be done before you go into the room. So for example, what are your strengths? Where has your experience paid off? Where have you helped organizations before today? What have you helped them do? That's the kind of unique value proposition. Brands always have unique value propositions, and we're drawn to them, whether we buy Nike sneakers or whether we buy a certain kind of car. There's a value there. What is your value? What do you want them to know about you? That's why I think going in with that portfolio, putting some notes down just to center yourself is a very helpful thing to do.
And remember when we said in the beginning, when you're preparing your pitch and thinking about, okay, is the person that I'm talking to, are they military or not? Are we going to have an instant rapport and they're going to understand my experience or not? There are very practical reasons for that, right? Because depending on where you want to spend your time in the conversation, it's helpful to know about the other person. I was working with a very senior, Air Force person. I don't know anything about the Air Force, the structure. He's taking forever to talk me through, well, this is the difference in the names of the titles and stuff between the Air Force and the Navy and the Army. And I was like, oh, I didn't realize that the branches all had different titles and stuff. And so that was going to be like, that took a long time for us to get on the same page there. But his specific expertise was in IT. I'd done a lot of technology recruiting, so it was very easy to obviously have that conversation. He was from Texas. I love Texas, been there many times. We talked about Texas, right? And so you've got to be finding those pockets and that ability to move in and out. Now, we were talking in a kind of coaching standpoint, but if I were a recruiter, I'd be remembering Texas, I'd be remembering IT, I'd be remembering the things that we had an affinity with, right? And so this is why you want to be thinking multidimensionally. Yes, it's a military career expo. Yes, the people there probably are going to have some kind of affinity, but it might just be a general company affinity, and they don't have any affinity or understanding or appreciation or anything.
That's why I think on the resume, and we're not doing a resume workshop today, but I think you should have interests in your resume because it's an icebreaker. I remember one of the last people I hired at Merrill Lynch was a scuba diver, and I'm a scuba diver, so I honed right in on that, and that's the first thing I asked her as we were walking to my office. So interests are key. Whatever 3 or 4 interests that you have, put them down. It could be a great icebreaker. Guaranteed, that's one of the first things that a resume reader will look at, believe it or not.
Yeah, and keep in mind too that the research they were talking about, putting a Google alert, going to the website, doing a LinkedIn advanced search, and all of that kind of stuff. Yeah, absolutely, that's a lot to do for 40 companies between now and March 19th, and so you want to prioritize and think about like which companies you really want to get to know. But I would certainly think that one way you can also categorize is by industry. So let's say that you are interested in large manufacturing or transportation or media and entertainment or whatever it is, want to stay working within the federal government, whatever that distinction is, and then figuring out, okay, so who are all of these companies that are in this space? What is happening in this space? I'm interested in these 2 in particular, and these are kind of my secondary ones. I'm going to do a lot of research around these, and and then whatever time I have left for the other ones. The other thing too is that the things that we're talking about here are not just for the Career Expo. This is about your job search overall. The Career Expo is one mechanism that companies use to reach out and make you aware and engage with you, and that you should be doing also. But to that person who asked that question about outside of events and job postings, how do we man a job search? It's through research, it's through all the things that we're talking about. So I definitely think some of this stuff is definitely about the Career Expo, but it's also broader than that. So it's not like here to March 19 and then, okay, you're not doing anything.
Purely professional behavior. I remember I was helping a young woman with her job search, and she got the letter that said, you're going to meet with these 5 individuals. It's going to be 5-on-1 interview. So she said, what do I do with this info? I said, let's look them up. So we looked up each one. She made notes. Their picture was there. She got to the company, went into the elevator, and recognized the guy in the elevator was one of the 5. And she said, Connie, I didn't know if I would be stalking him or what I should do. So she said, my name is Jenna. I think you're interviewing me today. And he said, how did you know who I was? He was so impressed by that. So impressed. They developed rapport in the elevator. He ushered her into the interview. She got the internship. She got the full-time job. She's been there a 1.5 years. So it's a wonderful, it's very flattering, but it's also really smart to know. Because look, we're all human beings, right? If you connect here, is it more important than connecting here? I mean, to have something in common. My sister works at a company, she's been there 12 years. She was telling me that there was this woman on the other side of the desk, she works on a trading floor, and she didn't like her, didn't like anything about her. The woman didn't like her. They kept their distance. Then they found out that they had something in common. And now they're the best of buddies. So when you connect here, it's a fantastic way to have that rapport. Fantastic.
So, I'll give another answer to that question. So if you are concerned about people somehow seeing that you looked at your profile, looked at their profile, you can actually turn that setting off in LinkedIn. The trick with that is that if you go into your settings and you say that people cannot see that it was you who looked at their profile, so what will happen is they'll say someone looked at your, someone looked at your profile. But that also reduces the amount of information that you get about people looking at your profile. And I like to see who's looking at my profile. In fact, remember I was talking about that Air Force person and I was saying, we had this Texas thing and the IT thing. We met through LinkedIn. He looked at my profile, and so it came up in my alert saying these people looked at your profile, and I had just at that time been doing some military stuff, so I noticed his profile, and I said, oh, I noticed you were looking, but I don't know, was it the Air Force? I hadn't been working, So I said, oh, I noticed that you looked at my profile, like, hello, like, why is that? And he said, oh, you led this webinar at this thing, and I just wanted to see who the speaker was, so I clicked on your profile, and we started this conversation and this dialogue, and we still are in touch, right? And so, it's just, this is what the internet does. This is what social media does in the best way, So I think, and again, I'm a recruiter, so I'm very used to open networking. I do a lot of social media, so I think people are going to have different comfort levels with it. So I'm just saying that that kind of positive outcome is out there if you decide to really jump in to social media. And then if you decide, look, I'm just going to put my profile up there, I'm not going to engage so much, I'm going to turn that setting off, that's fine too. But I would absolutely research people, and I would not feel bad about that. It is impressive to people that you know about them. So I just want to cover the structure of the pitch because I think it is something that it is so important, right? And so, we're going to give some ideas for what to talk about. But again, think about that blended pitch. Think about making it your own. Think about the things that would be useful there. But what I will say, the first thing to building a pitch is your pitch actually changes because it is bookended by two things. What is true and authentic to you? And what is relevant and resonant with the other person. So if I am giving a workshop to working parents, I will talk about marrying my high school prom date, having 2 kids, one of whom is going to college in the fall, blah, 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 right? Which it wasn't at all in my opening here. If I'm at a business school, my pitch is around used to work at Goldman Sachs and Oliver Wyman because that's meaningful to the people in the room. Not meaningful here. I didn't mention it, right? So what I chose to mention was being a career changer and moving in and out because really the theme for a lot of folks, at least a lot of military folks that I've worked with, that I've interviewed, is there is that transition. There is that military to civilian. Typically, there's a sector transition. If they go from public to private, there might be an industry transition. So there's all sorts of things going on that are transition related, right? So it's not any less true that I have 2 children or that I worked at Goldman Sachs, right? So I'm not hiding anything. But I have selectively, because in the 20 seconds, decided that I am going to tell you something that I know is going to land and that you're going to hear, right? So the first decision that you want to make is, what is it that I want people to hear? And this is especially for the question about on-ramping and about career change and about I'm looking for a government-related job or domain-specific knowledge. This is a key one, right? Because a lot of people build their pitch over what it is that they happen to do. Right? And that's true, that's the building blocks of it. But when you think about how is it actually going to leave your mouth and what is it that you're going to emphasize and talk about, it is what you are driving towards. So you might be on-ramping because you took 12 years off to raise kids or whatever. I don't know what it is, whatever. That's not what you're going to talk about. If you are gunning for, compliance manager at, whatever, you're going to talk about things that are relevant to being a compliance manager at that particular company. And you're going to pick apart your background and think about, so what, in terms of attention to detail, organization, types of people that I worked with, all of that stuff, what am I going to pull out of that that's going to land with that person? So that's really the first thing that I want you to think about. That's why Connie was talking about so much research around the career fair. It isn't because we're expecting you to go company by company, but you really want to think about, okay, which companies am I going to hit, which industries, what am I going to talk about, what types of jobs are out there that they're recruiting for so that I can pull out my IT background instead of spending 15 minutes talking about the different branches and titles of the armed forces kind of thing, right? Do you want to go on or should I just keep going? So you think about where it's going to land. But some of the elements of a pitch that you want to consider are things like years of experience, what have you been doing, what's your industry expertise, which industries have you worked with, government, defense, transportation, social work, what are the things that you've been doing, what's the role that you've been playing, and again, take out the jargon. So for someone who's civilian like myself, when I've interviewed people and they'll say that they've managed a ship or I have no idea what that means. I have no idea how many people we're talking about here. What is the budget in terms of like what is the value of stuff that they're either procuring or managing or moving around, or like what does that even entail? Who are they working with? That's the kind. So when you think about your role, don't think in terms of title. Think in terms of where were you in the organization? What types of people are you working for? What exactly are you doing, right? So how are you going to describe that? What are all of your skills? Same thing, you know, for on-rampers, career changers, all of that. This is where it gets so important, because as a career changer, by definition, right, your background is irrelevant. I trained as a classical pianist, okay, and became a strategy consultant. Okay, so one could argue that I spent hours a day doing something that is totally meaningless in the context of what it was that I did, right? But when I talked about discipline and, you know, high level of achievement and the competitiveness and the grit factor and all of these other things, and coupled with I knew the industry that I was going after. I was a strategy consulting in financial services. I followed the financial markets. It was clear that I could be a peer, and I just had to leapfrog there. So you don't get a free pass just by saying, hey, I'm smart, I'm going to work really hard. This is where the research comes in again. It's, I've already looked at your company. I already know something about you. I would fit in here, or you know, this is what I think. To Connie's point about a hypothesis. This is where I would probably fit, and you know, what do you think about that? I noticed you had this job open. This seems like right in line with what I do because I did X, Y, Z. What do you think about that? You know, I worked with a woman who did on-ramp for 12 years. I think that's why I had 12 in my brain. She took 12 years off to raise a family. And in that time, you know, she worked for the PTA, you know, I mean, like things like that. She did a lot of community service. I was not going to talk about the PTA. I said, look, you know, you're going into organizations, and I get it, you know, I mean, like that's a lot of what you did, but let's talk about, they're not going to, unless their constituents are parents and teachers, that's not going to land. Now, it might be parents and teachers, but unless it was, it wasn't. So what was it exactly that you did? And it hinged on fundraising and kind of the organization. She's now an executive director of a nonprofit that needed heavy duty, you know, the fundraising, kind of the branding strategy, her contacts, all of that stuff. And she did it not by talking about herself as a mom who on-ramped for 12, you know, like that was just a given. There's a gap in her resume that's 12 years long. But it was about, this is the kind of stuff that I was doing during this time. This is what you need. I'm going to make that match. Okay, same thing with Air Force guy who's retiring off of active duty, runs IT for his entire base. I don't know what that means because I don't know how a base is structured. So how many people are we talking about? What systems are you using? So when you say, you know, so are we talking help desk all the way through networking and all of the telecommunications? Like what are we talking about here? Because as a tech recruiter, right, I will need to be able to translate that to companies. So you want to think in your pitch, this is who I am in terms of years of experience, industry expertise, some kind of role, some kind of definition of my role. That's probably all you're going to have time for in a 20-second. But to Connie's point about elasticity, here are some things that you might add. An example. Examples are super helpful, right? So I'm working with a kid right now. He's 2 years out of school. His pitch is around because he's doing marketing for an internet startup in the car industry. What does marketing mean? Well, he specifically does social media, SEO, media relations. So he mentions a few things. So for example, you know, so I've taught him to say when he says, I do marketing for an internet startup in the car industry, for example, media relations, SEO, social media, right? So it's a very clear, it's not direct mail marketing, it's not brand strategy, it's not all these things that are marketing, okay? So you want to think about that. If you want to say something like, well, I work on contracts with who? Like the federal government, with the private sector, like what are we talking about? Are you actually legally looking over these contracts? Are you the person that's kind of troubleshooting between the organizations? Like what is your role in this giant thing?
One way to clarify all of these very, very important things that you're going to talk about is first of all, get your schedule and start working on it now. Don't wait until the 18th or the 17th, a couple days before. So schedule out your time and think about your biggest accomplishments. What are you most proud of? And then dissect it. So take your 3 biggest accomplishments and quantify, what was the team like? What were the projects? What was the time frame? What was the budget? And start to remind yourself, because sometimes we're so busy we forget. You have to sit back and think of all the things we've done, especially if there is a gap of 10 years. So we have to refresh ourselves. You don't want the wheels to be turning while you're at the career fair. And while there is an opportunity for you to spend 10 minutes with the person that you most want to talk to, let's jump on that opportunity and be prepared. Because don't be mistaken. It's not an interview, but yes it is. Because it's not a formal interview, you're not sitting across the table, but everything you say is counted with a great amount of weight. Because just like I said, as you walk away, I want you to make some notes of what they said. They're doing the same thing. When you leave, they're going to make a couple of notes. Because after they speak to 200 people, they all blend into one. So it is your job as a job search candidate to know what your value is and to be able to clearly and concisely communicate it. And if that means, how budget, I don't care. There's not my mind doesn't have a level that says, okay, I'm not going to consider anyone who didn't manage anything more than $250,000. I'm not doing that. But if you're going to tell me that you managed $100,000 or $50,000, then I want to know that there was a lot of thought and a lot of planning and success there. I want it to be a mini story where you're the hero. Where you're the hero of that story, that you saved the day. Some people, believe it or not, will bring up things that are huge failures to me. And I'm like, hello, please don't go there. This is a very positive interaction. We all have good things that happen. We all have bad things that happen. We want to focus on the good things. We want to focus on mini stories where you're the hero. So if it's that PTA budget, if you're on ramping again, talk about how you maximize a small budget and you did great things. Or if you're a military person and you have run a team of 25 and it was a competition and you won that competition, talk about that. Talk about the camaraderie, the teamwork, how you strategized everything. And you have to do it in advance, because if you wait until the 19th or whatever, is it the 19th? Your mind gets a little cloudy sometimes.
Yeah, and it's always easier to edit than it is to add, right? So I have 2 exercises for this. So one is written. Just write your story out. Write your story out and make it a page long. Just keep writing whatever you're thinking about. Connie's 3 accomplishments. Yeah.
A section for work, a section for extracurricular.
Right.
Make it one page.
Right. So you can do it chronologically. You can do it by achievement. So you're writing. And then edit that to half a page. Force yourself and look at it and say, what are the things that I'm going to cut here? What makes the top? And then force yourself from half a page to a paragraph. And then, what are the 3 key bullet points that I want to keep? Right? Because you're trying to shrink. And you can do this verbally as well. And keep in mind that even if you prefer the written exercise, your pitch at the end of the day is verbal. And we can always tell if you've only prepared your pitch in writing, because then you memorize it. We don't write the way we speak. And so it comes out really strange. And you can record yourself and hear it, and that's what I recommend. So you set your microwave timer for 2 minutes, you set your iPhone recorder, your voicemail recorder, and you just force yourself to talk until you hear the timer go off. Tell your story 2 minutes, then 1 minute, then half a minute, and then, and that gives you that kernel of that 20 seconds to 30 seconds. What am I going to keep in there? Ask the great questions. And again, you want to be elastic about this, because you don't know if you're going to get an employer who's got, they're 50 people deep, they're the only person there, they're losing their voice, they're not taking questions. So you want to have, this is why Connie said 7 or 8. Are you going to be able to ask 7 or 8 questions? Probably not. If you can ask 1 question, that's a lot. But then there are going to be some employers who are alone. They're there and then they want to keep you there because they're bored. And so they're like, yeah, talk to me. And so you have that opportunity basically to have an interview practically with this person, right? So you just don't know. Be considerate of others. So that's the 50 people line deep. We definitely noticed as employers when someone was gracious enough to step away and realize that they had used up their time. And when we could see the line kind of moving and this person was still kind of keeping other people from approaching the table, I didn't look at that very nicely because I just thought this person does not share and is not aware of what's going on around them, right? So that was a red flag. Ask about next steps. So when you meet people, this is true in a career fair, this is true in a job interview, always ask, what's the process from here? What are you going to be doing with these resumes? Get a sense for what their hiring process is like. Well, I'm not the recruiter, I'm from such and such, or they sent me here because I went to West Point, and so I'm just going to drop this off at HR, or you know what I mean? So find out, what are they going to do with these resumes? Who should you follow up? What's the best way to follow up? What's the best way to keep in touch? Ask those types of questions. Don't assume. Say thank you and shake hands or not. Again, take that person's lead and stay positive. So this is really where the fatigue factor comes in, and just remember that for the employer, it's us with hundreds and hundreds. We're doing the same story and answering the same questions usually again and again and again. It is exhausting. Career fairs were the most exhausting. I can't even think, it's just exhausting.
So what to do after? There you go. All right. So what I had told you before, very important to take mini breaks after going to each table. Write down some notes. Be organized so that you don't lose cards, that you don't lose notes, that you say, okay, this person mentioned that they come to all the military fairs. This person said, boy, this is the first military fair. Make whatever notes you can, blonde hair, dark hair, short hair, whatever it is, remember, because we're going to forget. If you can get their cards, get it. There are going to be some people that just don't want to give it out because they want you to submit online. You have to respect what they want to do and go with it, but make a note so that you're clear. Send thank you notes that day or within 24 hours. I remember we were talking before the workshop started. There was a young man that I on a military base. He was a civilian though. And I said, Kevin, how did the interview go? And he said, it was great. It's just what I want to do. I said, oh, terrific. What was their interest? Their interest level was very high. I said, good. Did you send a thank you note? He said, I was going to do it tomorrow. I was like, well, why do it tomorrow? Why don't you do it now? He said, okay, I'll go do it now. I said, wait, what are you going to say? So think about what you're going to say. Think about that conversation. Go back to your notes. Maybe the more specific the job search, the better it's going to be. They'll remember you that way, the more specific. So thank you note that day, keep it short, thank them, but mention something that you discussed.
Snail mail or email?
I am a huge proponent of email because snail mail will get lost. I worked at Merrill Lynch. I got mail 3 months after you sent it, if I got it at all. Some people feel very strongly, though, that they want to do. So do two if that's the case. Do a handwritten one, say something a little different, and you can put that in the mail. But I would strongly suggest email.
Just from a time perspective.
Yeah. You want them to get it right away. Again, you want to be clear. In your thank you, put your LinkedIn hyperlink so that they can say, oh, I remember that person. I remember the person I met. And so it's a much easier way to stay organized and professional. Organize all your contact info, whether it's folders, whatever it's going to be, Excel spreadsheets. If you are meeting with someone at a company and you've met a couple of people before from that company, mention that. So now you're establishing that there is a better case to be made. You know different people. They've recommended you perhaps. Keep that on an Excel spreadsheet so you never lose that. And then create a plan for continued networking and contact. We do a networking workshop where we talk about how to follow up. You can say thank you. Thank you for coming to the career fair. I appreciated your time. It was great talking to you about, it seems like we both did a little bit of martial arts when we were younger. That's something that Kevin used when he interviewed on the base. He and his manager both had martial arts when they were teenagers. So you can thank them for their time. You can continue to keep updated with them, continue networking with them. Give them an update, how things are going with you. If you plan it every 5 to 7 weeks, you can have a Google alert. Maybe you have an interesting article about that company. You could say, I hope you remember me. We met a couple of months ago at the career fair at West Point. I've been following your company. I've applied to a couple of jobs. I found this incredible article I wanted to share with you. Again, thank you for coming to the base. It will differentiate you if you continue to follow up in a generous and non-committal way. I take that from Caroline. Generous in that you're sharing information. Networking is a two-way street, okay? It's not only someone taking and someone giving. That really gets tired, and people get exhausted of giving and they feel depleted. So it's back and forth. Networking is a back and forth. So if you give them things, let them know what other people thought of the career fair. Let them know that there was a buzz about their company. Follow up with them in that respect. Holiday greetings. You know, I once knew the most successful financial advisor at Merrill Lynch, which was no small thing because there were 15,000 of them. And I said to Suba, how did you get to the top 1% of all financial advisors? And she said, I didn't stop until I got no 9 times. The 9th time, I stopped. How many people stop when they don't hear back? Oh, well, this person did. First of all, number one, you don't know what the situation is with it. It could have nothing to do with you. Could be a very unorganized person. Could be someone who's really busy. Could be someone who's had a really tough thing happen in their life, and maybe they're just out for the next 2 months. You know, you just don't know what it is. So don't think it's you. Develop some thick skin and say, you know what, I'm going to proceed in a very organized manner, and I'm going to keep every 7 to 8 weeks touching base with this person. I'm going to keep an email alert on jobs that pertain to me, and I'm going to let them know that I've applied because they took the time to come at the end of March to West Point. It's okay. I've had people follow up with me for very, very long times. It's almost like we have a rapport, and I really rarely got back because I didn't have to. But it was like, oh, look, they're watching what's happening. They're sharp. They know what's going on. I will also tell you, coming from a large company that we have spent hundreds of thousands of dollars on applicant tracking systems. Sometimes we create them ourselves. Sometimes we buy. But we do, it's not a black hole. Sometimes some companies will, it is a black hole, but it wasn't with us. Our recruiters would always say, hey, Joe applied again. You know, this is the perfect job for him. Or, oh, I can't believe he's applying to 7 jobs that are totally different. It doesn't make sense. So our opinion of that person would change because it wasn't a targeted job search. Sometimes when it's targeted, so we do see on the other side. Some people don't think we do, but we do. And at some companies, I can't speak for all companies. I could just say at the ones that I worked, we did see what was happening on the other side.
I wanted to just make sure that we've covered everything. So the question about the hidden job market, because this is so important. So this is the idea that some jobs just don't get posted. And so just from an employer's perspective, basically what's happening is this. When they know that they have a need they need to hire, it's because they're so busy or something has happened, a new project has come up, they need to hire, but they're too busy to hire, right? Their first idea isn't, well, we need to take people off of what they're doing to launch a thoughtful and proactive hiring process. That is not going to happen. If someone fell from the sky that could do that role, that would be the best possible situation, right? Because it's not their problem to run a fair and equitable hiring process. So the idea is that you want to be as close to the decision maker as possible so that you're in and around when they start having problems and needs that you could possibly fill. That's the hidden job market. So unless you're going for a recruiting job or an HR job, that closest person is not in recruiting or in HR. We find out about jobs much later. After the need is approved, after the budget is approved, then it's, will you help me? Maybe, if I have a relationship with that department, maybe they'll hire all by themselves, right? So this idea around the career fair and preparing your pitch and researching the companies and figuring out what it is that they need, and then Connie's idea of going back to them and really keeping in touch over the long term is because as you start developing these relationships with people and figuring out what is it that they need, when a need does come up, because you don't ever know when that's going to open up, you want to be the person that they think of, or at least think of to refer to some other department because they heard that there was a need there. Right? That is how you get to the hidden job market. It is networking, following up, being clear about what your value is so that people remember your value and are able to refer you should the need arise. Culture. How do you know? You have to ask. This is not something that you Google. Right? So in a company's website, they will say something about the culture, the way that they talk about themselves, even just the layout, the design, how they talk about their management team, what their backgrounds are. You'll know something a little bit, right? But the best is always to talk to people who used to work there, and ideally in the area that you want to be, right? Because there are subcultures within companies as well. And things that you want to find out are military friendly, unfriendly. Do they appreciate this background? Do they know, or do I have to educate them, sell them? You know, that's the kind of stuff that you're trying to find out.
So go through your network, the people that you do know, the people that you are friendly with, the people that you've networked with, but also go to LinkedIn. You can follow companies on LinkedIn and learn about what happens at those companies. You can look at people's LinkedIn connections and ask that they make an introduction. That's what it's all, LinkedIn is so much. It's so much. It's a research tool, it's a networking tool, it's a job search tool.
Yeah, and then in terms of marketing yourself, remember resume, cover letter, online profile pitch, even pulling that stuff together and thinking about what do I put in, what do I edit, what do I select for what type of situation. That is how you market yourself. And in terms of,
Length of resume. One page,
you
2
line
pages,
up 10 recruiters and you ask them the same question, they are going to say different things. The end of the day, the most conservative response is 1 page, because people who are willing to read 2 pages aren't going to say, well, this resume is only 1 page. I'm going to toss this one away, versus the opposite is not true, right? If you have more than 10 years of experience, you know, could it spill over into a 2nd page? Yeah, absolutely. Just recognize that it might just be the 1st page that gets seen, and so you really want to be judicious about where it ends on that 1st page, and have you said everything that you want to say really in that 1st page. This is why LinkedIn is also so helpful too, because it's a much different experience paging through an online profile than it is a paper resume.
What
So,
I've also
you know.
done is worked with a lot of people to create a professional summary that sits at the top of the page, short, succinct, to the point, which explains the value of what you bring.
Yeah.
That's another way to go.
You know, so in terms of overqualified, so this idea, remember, so marketing yourself is about what do you choose to include, not include, and at what time. Same thing with overqualification. Overqualification just refers to some sort of baseline, and I'm not sure why you've selected that baseline, right? So it could be that there is a company and all of its open jobs right this very second might be entry-level jobs or jobs for which you are overqualified, but does that mean that every job that they have, there could be hidden jobs, right? So what you really want to find out is what is the structure of that group that would enable you to say, okay, there's only 1 person who heads compliance and I'm more senior than them, you know, in terms of what I've worked with. Yeah, that might be the case where that particular company is too small, right? And so it doesn't make sense to pursue that particular company. Or your specialty is government contracts and they just, you know, government is 10% of their business. And you're just not going to be as interesting to them. That doesn't mean that they're not going to have a job for you, but it's about thinking about, you know, what is that baseline that I am marketing against? So that's all I'm going to say about overqualified. It's, you know, by what standard? So domain-specific knowledge, career change, right? So we talked about this. So it's not about what you're bringing, it's about the other person. And so any specific knowledge, expertise, skill set, if you put it in the context of why it is going to be useful to the other person, it's the same reason why I can pull out an online marketing example and talk about awareness, engagement, and conversion, and it's still relevant, right? Because we are not doing online marketing right now, but that paradigm, I just think, is a very elegant way of thinking about even the job search, right? And so you can always interpret things according to, if you don't forget what the objective is and who you're talking to, and that's why the research, it really hinges on research. Did someone, you know, when someone had said domain-specific knowledge, was there something more specific than that, or did we cover it by the whole marketing? Okay, great. Then on-ramping, same thing, right? So it's not about why you on-ramped, it's about what you did during the on-ramp, what you're bringing currently. It's really about just not feeling like you have to make excuses or feel defensive about the experience that you bring. And, you know, Connie said at the very, very beginning, it's about being mentally ready and saying, I deserve to be hired, I am the right match for someone. I'm going to figure out who that someone is and how to position myself, whether it's on-ramping, career changing, you know, whatever that is. And then the government-related, just concerned about the decrease. Yeah, I mean, I don't think anyone knows what's going on with the sequester, I mean, I think there's a lot of panic around. I think you should look at companies, if you are thinking about where to go, I would be looking at companies that are heavily federally funded or that are relying on federal contracts and see if those grants are coming in. You know, I mean, if they lose certain contracts or certain aid or whatever it is as a ripple effect, they're just not going to hire. So you do want to think about that in the short term, but I just don't know what long term.
What I also want to say, what I want to add to this is disabilities. You know, I worked at large companies all my life, and the larger the company, if there is a disability issue, the larger the company, the more apt they are to make an accommodation. So when I was at Citigroup, I worked with an employee who was deaf. So we had the equipment, he had a special phone, he had a special computer. When we had a conference line, he had special accommodations. I opted to take some sign language. I'm far from being an expert at it, but we went out of our way to make those accommodations. Large companies will do that. Smaller companies probably won't. Middle-sized companies may not know what to do or how to do it. So you have to take that, if that is a consideration of yours, opt for the larger companies. Find out what information you can from the website. But certainly there's a level where they have to make reasonable accommodations, and they gladly do.
But keep in mind that not all disabilities, and it depends on the job, right? So the opposite works as well, where you might have a disability, it might be a visible disability, but you're working a desk job and it's really not going to matter. And if you feel like it's going to be an issue because it's just something that you can't hide and you shouldn't hide it, it's neutralized if there's going to be some sort of issue. You know, because HR people, interviewers, they're not going to know exactly what to ask. They're only allowed to ask if there's something that impacts whether or not you can do the actual job. So if you feel like they might make assumptions just based on what your situation is, talk about how you can do the job. Give specific examples, or that obviously neutralize the issue. So I think it really depends on.
With that, we are going to ask you, I don't know if this will come up, but there are ways to stay in touch with us if you like. I think, there you go. Six Figure Start is our company. That's our number. We actually have some of our clients call that number and leave their pitch. And then we send it back. It creates a WAV file and we send it back to them so they can hear it. But there are our email addresses. We have a newsletter that is job search focused. So you can sign up to our newsletter. You'd get those 12 most asked questions in an interview. But more importantly, you get a lot of information about the job search and about career success on our blog, via our newsletter. This newsletter I just wrote was about resilience, and that being the secret of life and the secret of the job search. And we have a radio show as well. You can follow us on all the social media. This is what we do. We do group workshops. We do one-on-one. We're going to be meeting one-on-one with some individuals later. And that's our book, 6 Steps to Job Search Success. And it has all of our knowledge of the job search in that book, if that's of interest to you.